From the Department of Communication in Phillipsburg, this is a special edition of Inside Government with Cedric Peterson.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Inside Government. In this edition, we're going to be talking about the Royal Visit 2023. His Majesty King Willem-Alexander will be coming to St. Martin February 6th and 7th. And my guest this edition of the program, it represents the Department of Culture under the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, Ms. Clara Reyes, and representing the Nature Foundation St. Martin, we're speaking also with Foundation Manager, Ms. Leslie Hickerson. Ladies, it's great to have you in the program. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for having me.
We are, of course, honored to have the royal family joining us in February, and we look forward to having the conversation about how cultural manifestation will be taking place. Leslie, you'll be touching on the sciences, and we have the science fair that will be featured along with the birding tour that will be taking place. But before we get into the program that's going to be featured for the royal visit, I want to talk to each one of you within your respective disciplines. Clara, culture is the topic of the day at this particular point. Saddened that the situation our country is experiencing in regard to the Diamond Estate, for the choice of word, vandalized, has broken the hearts of all of us, and we've basically discussed it nationally. I want to get your take on this. What is the impact of such a thing on one's culture in a country?
Okay, I thought I heard the last part of your sentence because the internet dropped out. But you asked, what is the impact of culture on the national landscape of St. Martin and just in general? Culture, in its simplest description, is the story of us, the way we live. Everything from the most simplest, how you brush your teeth, how you manage your household, how the country organizes itself. So you have all these pockets of rhythms of life that establishes a very specific rhythm that is deemed as culture. On a grand scale, culture is the very nature of us, who we are as a society, how we live, how we celebrate our joys, our pains, the rhythm of life we establish to tell the story of how we function. And so in its simplest form, culture is usually visible, and people associate culture with the artistic expressions, the songs we sing, the dances we dance, the things we do at funeral rites, all these various traditional elements that are encapsulated. So when something as grand as a destruction of a very important heritage site happens, it rocks the society to the core, as expressed by the numerous people that have approached me, because at some point there's a value system attached to this thing that had a lot of vested energy from those that came before us. And it seems sacrilegious that someone would very arbitrarily, without any thought, to the years of how long this monument has been in place, that it would just so arbitrarily destroy it. Now, let me add that the destruction of what happened at Diamond Estate is also a culture that has been established in St. Martin. I mean, I grew up as a child watching numerous buildings on Back Street and Front Street, stone walls, wells, all of these things being very arbitrarily dismissed and destroyed, So that's a culture that we have inherited, and that's a culture that somehow we have all perpetuated, not just in the intangible and the tangible way of expression, but also how we deal with nature. The disregard for old trees, the disregard for our oceans, the disregard for everything. So we now have to recognize our role, whether we were apathetic in not being involved as we should have. There's a lot of layers. I told someone the other day, we have a culture of apathy. We have a culture where everybody wants someone else to do it. Oh, when they gonna do this? Who gonna do that? And I'm like, no, it's our responsibility. Each man is responsible for the legacy bestowed to us in all its myriad of forms from our ancestors, our grandparents, my grandmother, your grandmother. These people worked so hard to build St. Martin, you know. And under the heading of jollification, this is how St. Martin came to be. The building of our homes, the coming together in unity, somebody cooking the food, and together we build our homes. So these are very important traditions that is bestowed to us. We have a responsibility to, to nurture and respect the intelligences that was sent on to us through our elders. So when you ask the question what the impact was, it is as impactful as the attention that we dedicate to it. I hope that makes sense. If we have never taken the time to honor these things, then the impact is not great. But because so many people now, with the awareness campaigns and the multiple events that have been doing and the multiple organizations that have, you know, the St. Martin Pride Foundation, there's all these various organizations that have been shouting, the Heritage Foundation, the Museum Foundations, Tikuza when I was a child, you know, Meneer van Hoover, you know, El Shabazz, Jave Haverser, you know, Parin, Emilia Wilson, Zacharias Myers, Nana, Yaya, Den. The list of people, they have been the vanguards, you know, who have been making sure that these heritage sites and the traditions of St. Martin have always been put front and center. So yes, when something is arbitrarily destroyed, in the same way you see a mangrove being destroyed, in the same way you're seeing people are, because it rips at the core of who we are. I hope I answered that question.
Sure did. And the thing is, you helped me to also go into the next question I wanted to ask you in regard to how does one acquire that culture? You've already indicated that by Shirley just simply living through, because you shared, for example, when growing up, these were the experiences. Please reaffirm for us, please, especially with our viewing and listening audience, the importance of the acquisition of one's culture. Again, living that experience in St. Martin, listening to yourself as a person responsible for it. How do they take ownership in the acquisition of culture?
One of the things we have to be alert to is verbiage, the kind of words we use. And we tend to diminish the value of our own activities and our own richness by using simple words. Oh, that's local. Oh, that's this. And then we tend to put a value on someone else. You know, I think about growing up in St. Martin, eating pomseret, hog, plum, sour sop, star fruit. All of these things were valuable to me because these are the products that the earth produces in St. Martin. Yet, when I go to events, everybody buying strawberries, kiwis, blueberries. So we've already diminished what the planet has given us for this region by saying eating a strawberry is a more powerful healing thing when we have papayas, kenebs. So it became that simple. It became that simple when we talk, oh, the old people thing. You know what the old people used to say? We already start to diminish the value of us by not recognizing the intelligence and the intellect in the way of living. You know, when we think of building old homes, I remember after Hurricane watching every old St. Martin house stand through Hurricane Lewis. But still, then we design buildings that we don't take into consideration the architectural savvy and intelligence of how these homes were built to rock with the wind, to balance the pressure of the hurricane wind. So all we can do as those in the knowledge bearers and the knowledge practitioners is to continuously inform, and lay a body of work that will stand on its own long after we have gone. So one of the challenges I know we grew up as a child was because of our oral traditions, documenting was not a very powerful part of who we are. So now that is the difference. You know, you see the young people creating images, videos, films. So now that you have something tangible that they can connect to, they see it more readily, they have an understanding, oh, there is a history before me. So what we can do and what we are doing is the recordings, are the documentations, is creating the books. For instance, the presence of House of Nehesi producing all these literature of St. Martin, also with Mark Yokohama doing all this inventory. So technically, how we can protect is making it visible and recording it and making it visible so people can have something to hold on to. Because like, the African proverb goes that when an elder dies, a whole library goes with them. So now we have to create the library presence so people can go to it long after we have left.
Clara, can culture change? And if so, what are the contributing factors of that?
Culture has to change. Culture can be stagnant, If it becomes stagnant, then it dies. So you have to record as you go, and it's a natural progress of the humanity. There's an evolution. Every generation improves upon a generation. Some things are, have a different kind of longevity, but other things are organic to change. I remember growing up, one of the things people used to talk about, oh Lord, is if he don't love me, if he don't bang me, he don't love me. But now we know, in loving, that's abuse, women. So that's a culture that we have learned to recognize that, wow, that's really abusive to a relationship, to have that, the imbalance of power and putting someone at a disadvantage and holding this power over the other. So the same thing with animal rights and traditions. So those are traditions that are always evolving as people are more involved and are becoming more in tune to the intelligences of various traditions. Everything needs to be questioned. Everything needs to be looked at and have a better understanding. So culture cannot be stagnant. It is always mobile. It's always in transition. And as we live, new values are established based on the rhythms of life that we are establishing.
If you're just joining us, I'm having a conversation with head of the Department of Culture under the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth, and Sport, Ms. Clara Reyes, and of course, Leslie Hickerson, Foundation Manager, Nature Foundation, St. Martin. Our conversation is going to be continuing right after this break. Stay with us as we get into how the modern age might be impacting our culture and how we have to adjust, especially in light of that change that Ms. Reyes has talked about. And we'll be getting our conversation started with Ms. Leslie Hickerson, as Nature Foundation will be dealing with the science fair that's going to be a part of the Royal Visit 2023. Stay with us. You're Inside Government. Welcome once again to our viewers and listeners here at home and around the world. If you're just joining us, you're Inside Government, and we're talking about the Royal Visit 2023. His Majesty King William Alexander will be on island February 6th and 7th, himself along with members of his family. And we are talking to two individuals that are responsible for key features during the Royal Visit. Ms. Clara Reyes, head of the Department of Culture under the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth, and Sport, and Ms. Leslie Hickerson, Foundation Manager, Nature Foundation, St. Martin. We left off talking about how culture can change. And as Clara indicated, it has to do so. It's not a static thing. It's very dynamic. Clara, the last question I have for you in this segment is how has modern age impacted culture or continues to impact culture? I wanted to see that through your perspective.
Ooh, that's a big one. How has modern age? How has modern age? As I said, every generation brings with it intelligences that's going to inform on different things. And likewise, so the modern age, at least in St. Martin, is bringing the ability to help document it. Searching for old ruins. We now have GPSs, we have cartographers, we have different ways of electronically bringing to the fore images or artifacts long hidden from us. We have the modern age has a way of assisting us with how you say establishing how old an artifact is. So these are very important things. But on the flip side, if you are not a person that has been taught to pay attention with reverence and respect, the modern age has also brought apathy. People just concerned about their little small nucleus, and they miss the big picture. So we tend to forget that each one of us is connected to the other, and we are responsible for each other. So before there was a community based, I am because of the community. Now the individualism seems to have taken over a lot more, and that has brought its own downfall in terms of what is cultural. Before there was that wonderful family unit where the village was involved and there was a sense of responsibility. I belong to you, we're all responsible for the other. And by dismissing and narrowing that field, we're only concerned with ourselves. So constantly there's a disconnect from what is extremely valuable to maintain the continuous growth of and maintain of traditions that are so important for us as humans.
I want to bring in Leslie Hickerson, Foundation Manager, Nature Foundation. Leslie, thank you so much for being with us in this edition of the program. Want to get your insight as you will be responsible for the science aspect of the royal visit, where a science fair will be featured. Can you give us some insight into what can be expected?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for having us both, Cedric. I appreciate it. These are some really important topics being covered. And for the science fair, what we have planned is, as part of the Endoplastic Project, which is a 3-year project with the Nature Foundation, we have invited local schools, both primary and secondary schools, public foundational and private schools as well, to participate in a science fair with the theme of St. Martin's plastic problem and St. Martin's plastic solution. So we're hoping that students are coming up with creative and innovative ways of thinking about, in particular, single-use plastics. But we really wanted to make the project open to as many students as possible. So if they have another nature-themed project or something else that they'd like to address, that's also welcome. And we will be introducing the royal visit, the family and their committee, to the different projects of these students.
And I think you also mentioned a birding tour would also be a part of this.
Yes.
That's interesting. So what can be expected there in that particular feature?
Yes. So our resident local birding expert, which many of you, if you have any interest in birds, will know of, Binky Van Ness, and our staff member, Zakia Peterson, will be giving a short birding tour at DV, in particular looking for brown pelicans, the national bird of St. Martin, and discussing why we monitor these species, why it's important to protect them. I mean, the brown pelican is a key feature throughout the island in many different aspects. And we will take them to DV, which is one of their known nesting areas, to see if we can do a species count for them there.
Clara, coming back to you in regard to the cultural manifestation that the Department of Culture will be responsible for the royal visit, give us some insight into what will be taking place on your schedule of events.
So the event is called Jollification, the St. Martin story as told through the unity of St. Martin. So as I mentioned before, a very key component of what builds St. Martin is jollification. So gathering, I think about 500 performers from the various schools. We have the Catholic schools, Sister Borgia, St. Joseph, Orion schools, Heavenly Adventist, Learning Unlimited, CIA, the various entrepreneurs, the Phillipsburg Jubilee Library. We're going to create a cavalcade, a tapestry of St. Martin as told and seen and experienced through the eyes of the young person. So there will be an interdisciplinary performance that features steel pan, string pan, the National Youth Orchestra, drummers, what else? Poetry, dance. It's also embracing the various cultural families that live and work collectively on St. Martin. So we have presentations by the Indian community as well as the Asian community. So within 1 hour and a half, beginning at 4 p.m., coming through the arcade by the De Weaver, and starting by the gelateria, there will be this walking tour that will take them from that area and ending at the Captain Hodge Wharf. So they will experience Charlotte Brookson Academy. They will experience like all the schools I mentioned. And I have to really give thanks to the community of the businesses that have opened their businesses to allow the young people to perform on their premises. So starting with gelateria and Rama's gift store, kids will use those areas as specific stopping points. So the royal family will walk and engage. We have a fantastic mural presented by the students of the Milton Peters College, followed by a UNESCO presentation of a wire bending tradition. So these are all the different voices of St. Martin, especially as told through the young person. It's a young person story platform. So we get to engage with that for the royal visit. And again, with specifically geared towards reinforcing very important cultural values, the St. Martin story as told through music, as told through dance. So everything is original materials, poetry from St. Martin, songs written by St. Martin artists, but also lending itself to the time that we live in, bringing awareness to heritage. So that is what you will be seeing on Monday afternoon from 4 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. on the Phillipsburg Promenade.
And Leslie, give some insight in regard to the date of your event, date, time.
So we have the birding event early Tuesday morning, and that will be a closed off event because the louder you are, the less birds you'll see, of course. And then mid-morning around 10:30, we will start the science fair for the royal visit party. And then afterward, we will have some time open so that the parents of students that participate will be able to come and see their children's hard work as well.
Leslie, in the dynamic of this conversation, it's awesome that I'm able to speak to someone that's a part of the culture, arts, and science. And I don't think that these are separate of each other, especially in today's conversation. Leslie, how does science work hand in hand with the protection of our culture, especially seen through your eyes as a person responsible for Nature Foundation and what this foundation means to our environment and our culture as it relates to our environment and our species protection? Give us some insight there. I want to see that through your perspective.
Definitely. It's very clear for anybody working in conservation in St. Martin that the community's feeling of culture and connectedness and history and legacy, everything that Clara touched on, directly impacts how they treat the natural environment of St. Martin. People that are proud to be from the island and proud to show what we have here, and also can actually open their eyes and see the beauty of what is here, will always, always treat the island better. And there has been kind of what you mentioned in regards to the modern age and that feeling of apathy. There has been a couple of generations of St. Martin where that connection is kind of lost. And there isn't this feeling of St. Martin pride and I'm a St. Martiner, and that I think is more detrimental to the nature of St. Martin than anything else that we could do. I will say, though, that the current students that are in the schools right now that we work with to give presentations on, that we take out into the field and show things to, they're all so interested in the world around them. They're all desperate to learn more. It's part of, again, what Clara already mentioned, access to that written history, access to the ways of the past. If that was a little bit more accessible to them, if we gave them a little bit more in the way of resources and opportunities for learning, the students that are in St. Martin schools right now will be able to impact the island in such a profound way, we can't even articulate it now. We just need to give them the tools to do so because they have already the want for it.
Ladies, we are running out of time. I want to give you both the opportunity to provide our nation with some final words and on sight of the incoming Royal Visit 2023 in the month of February, starting with yourself. Leslie, final words to the general public?
Yes. So our final message is that the reason that we chose the plastic problem in St. Martin is very poignant for this science fair. There's a reason that we're addressing this issue. The impact that carelessly using these single-use plastics and styrofoams and discarding them into our environment, the impact that has on the island is tremendous. And it really takes very small little changes of the individual to reverse these impacts. So switching to using canvas bags, saying no to plastic straws, avoiding those styrofoam to-go containers, and cooking your own local meals would have such a positive impact on the island. Even if you feel like it's just one person doing it, it really, really makes a difference for us.
Thank you, Leslie. Clara, final words.
So the final words are, in supporting Leslie, one of the campaigns the Department of Culture is coming out with is called I Rich, which stands for I Remember Intangible Cultural Heritage. And what this does, it's a document that chronicles, a 32-page document that chronicles 5 important cultural elements of St. Martin. You know, the practice of what we do, how we do it, the performative aspects, the literary aspect, you know, the knowledge of the universe. So this document is a campaign that we're working on right now to help create an entry point into cultural tradition. So it's going to be a beautiful campaign that celebrates St. Martin's story. And the reason the name for I Rich, which when you see, it says I Rich. And then you ask, well, what are you rich with? And he says, I'm rich with culture and traditions. So it's called I Rich. I Remember Intangible Cultural Heritage. So built around that framework, that's the same approach that we're doing the Royal Visit. We're going to celebrate our story for ourselves. The royal family gets the privilege as invited guests to see who we are and what we're about. And it's not just something for them. The whole cultural manifestation is a celebration of us for us that the royal family gets privy to, you know, because we're not trying to, and I think that's one of the fallacies we've had over the years. We've always been doing stuff outside of ourselves for the other. We have never really invested in ourselves. Who are we? What are we? What are we about? What is our story for us to give ourselves some level of density? So the Irish campaign, the cultural manifestation on the jollification, the spirit of unity of St. Martin is what we're going to present to, again, put in motion a vehicle that celebrates St. Martin and help build respect and reverence for St. Martin so our young people feel connected and vested.
Head of the Department of Culture under the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, Ms. Clara Reyes, and Foundation Manager, Nature Foundation St. Martin, Ms. Leslie Hickerson. Thank you, ladies. Thank you so much for this dynamic conversation, short but very sweet as it relates to the culture and science and the role that they play together in order to make St. Martin truly a great place to live and enjoy for generations to come. Thank you so much for being a part of the program.
Thank you for having us, Cedric.
Thank you.
And to our radio listeners and television viewers, thank you for tuning in and being a part of this edition of Inside Government. If you've missed my conversation with these two dynamic ladies, we invite you to, of course, access video on demand at the official YouTube channel of the Government of St. Martin at youtube.com, Government of St. Martin. And for audio playback, be sure to tune in to St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM throughout the course of the day for rebroadcasts of this conversation and edition of Inside Government. On behalf of my colleagues down under the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth, and Sport, and of course, our colleagues via the non-governmental organization of Nature Foundation at St. Martin, I'm Cedric Peterson. Thank you so much for tuning in.